Warren Buffett disguises himself as a beggar and asks for money on the street. But when he reveals his identity, everyone is shocked. The autumn morning in Omaha was colder than usual. Warren Buffett adjusted the fake beard one last time, in the mirror of his mansion's bathroom. His hands trembled slightly, not from the cold but from the anxiety of what he was about to do. After months of planning this social experiment, the day had his personal assistant, James, watched with concern as he helped strategically dirty the old clothes the billionaire would wear. "Are you sure about this, sir? We can cancel everything, if you'd like," James said, handing him a plastic bag full of crushed cans. Buffett smiled, now completely transformed into a homeless man. "I've never been more sure, James. Sometimes we need to see the world from a different perspective to truly understand people." The plan was simple: spend the entire day on the streets of downtown Omaha asking passers-by for help. He wanted to understand how people treated those who seemingly had nothing to offer. His driver would drop him off a few blocks away, and from there he'd be on his own. As he walked toward the busiest corner of the city, Buffett felt the disgusted glances of pedestrians. Some abruptly changed direction, while others clutched their bags tighter. It was as if he had become invisible, or worse, a threat. "Could you spare some change for a coffee?" he muttered to a well-dressed woman passing by. She quickened her pace as if she hadn't heard a thing. The sun had barely risen, and Buffett was already beginning to understand what it meant to be treated as less than human. Every look of disdain, every person pretending not to see him, every whispered insult, all of it was being recorded in his investor's sharp mind. The smell of fresh coffee from the elegant cafe on the corner tortured Buffett. Not because he was hungry, he had eaten a hearty breakfast before leaving, but because of the irony of the situation. Inside, executives spent fortunes on elaborate drinks, while outside, he embodied those who barely had enough to eat. That's when he noticed a waitress approaching. Emily, as her name tag read, had deep dark circles under her eyes and a visibly worn-out uniform. Her shoes were scuffed at the tips, evidence of long hours on her feet. "Are you hungry, sir?" she asked, her genuine kindness surprising Buffett. He nodded, staying in character. Emily smiled and asked him to wait. Minutes later, she returned with a hot coffee and a piece of bread wrapped in a napkin. "I can't give much, but I hope it helps," she said before quickly returning to work. Buffett watched as she attended to the tables. He noticed how some customers treated her with disdain, as if she were beneath them, the same attitude he was now experiencing firsthand. As he sipped the coffee, surprisingly good, he noticed a middle-aged man watching him. Unlike the others, his gaze didn't carry judgment or disgust. There was something else, a genuine curiosity that intrigued the disguised billionaire. The man, who would later introduce himself as Daniel, continued observing for a few minutes before finally approaching. Buffett realized that his experiment was about to take an unexpected turn. Daniel approached Warren with measured steps, his worn work boots scraping against the sidewalk. Unlike the others who had passed by that morning, there was a warmth in his eyes that spoke of someone who understood struggle. "How are you doing today, sir?" Daniel asked, crouching down to meet Warren's eyes. His voice carried no trace of condescension, just genuine concern. Warren maintained his character, letting out a raspy chuckle. "Been better, but hanging in there." Daniel nodded thoughtfully, settling himself on the cold concrete beside Warren. "You know, I've seen many folks in these streets, but there's something different about you. Can't quite put my finger on it." The disguised billionaire felt a flutter of anxiety. Had his cover been blown? But no, Daniel's next words revealed something else entirely. "I was where you are about 5 years ago," Daniel continued, his eyes distant. "Lost everything in the 2008 crash. My business, my home, my dignity. Spent 18 months on these very streets." Warren listened intently, fascinated by the raw honesty in Daniel's voice. Here was a man who had faced true adversity, yet spoke without bitterness or self-pity. "What changed?" Warren asked, genuinely curious. "People like that waitress over there." Daniel gestured toward Emily. "Small acts of kindness, they add up, you know. Eventually I got back on my feet. Found work in construction. Now I have my own small contracting business. Nothing fancy, but it's honest work." The morning crowd had thinned out, leaving Warren and Daniel in relative privacy. A well-dressed businessman exited the cafe, clutching an expensive leather briefcase. As he passed, he deliberately stepped around them, muttering something about lazy bums under his breath. Daniel shook his head, a sad smile playing on his lips. You know what's funny? That guy probably thinks he's better than us, but I've learned that true worth isn't in what you have, it's in what you give. Reaching into his worn jacket, Daniel pulled out a crumpled $10 bill. Here, he said, pressing it into Warren's hand, get yourself something warm to eat. Warren stared at the money, deeply moved. Here was a man who had rebuilt his life from nothing, yet still found it in his heart to help others. I can't take this, Warren protested, maintaining his character but feeling genuine emotion. Sure you can, Daniel insisted. Someone helped me when I needed it, just paying it forward. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Warren. Here he was, one of the wealthiest men in the world, receiving $10 from someone who had truly known poverty. The lesson in humanity was more profound than anything he could have anticipated. As they sat there, sharing stories and observations about life, Warren began to formulate a plan. Daniel's generosity wouldn't go unrewarded, but more importantly, his story needed to be heard. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of compassion. The morning sun had risen higher now, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Warren knew the time for revelation was approaching, but for now, he simply listened as Daniel continued to share his wisdom, earned through years of hard-won experience. As the day wore on, Warren felt he had gathered enough insights for his social experiment. The time had come for the most intriguing part, the revelation. He made his way back to the cafe where Emily had shown him kindness earlier, spotting Daniel, sitting on a nearby bench, observing the city's hustle and bustle. Warren approached Daniel, who looked up with a mixture of confusion and concern. Sir, are you all right? With a gentle smile, Warren handed back the $10 bill. I believe this belongs to you. Daniel's brow furrowed. I gave that to you. There's no need to return it. Warren's smile widened as he began to remove his tattered disguise. He peeled off the fake beard, revealing his true identity. Beneath the dirty clothes, an elegant suit emerged. Daniel's eyes widened in disbelief. Wait, you're Warren Buffett? The revelation caused a stir. Passers-by who had ignored Warren earlier now crowded around, eager to catch a glimpse of the famous billionaire. But Warren paid them no mind, focusing solely on Daniel. I conducted a test today, Warren explained, his voice calm amidst the growing commotion. I wanted to see who would genuinely help someone expecting nothing in return, and you, Daniel, passed with flying colors. Daniel sat stunned, trying to process what was happening. Warren reached into his pocket and produced a checkbook. With steady hands, he wrote out a check and handed it to Daniel. Here's a reward for your generosity. Daniel's hands trembled as he accepted the check. When he saw the amount $500,000, he nearly fell off the bench. Emily, who had rushed over upon recognizing Warren, gasped in shock. Those who had ignored or scorned Warren earlier now desperately tried to get his attention, but it was too late. Warren placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. You showed that even with little, you're willing to help others. That means you deserve more than many who have fortunes. Use this money wisely. Daniel, eyes brimming with tears, could only nod silently. The next morning, news of Warren Buffett's secret experiment dominated headlines. Television networks, newspapers, and social media platforms buzzed with accounts of how the billionaire had disguised himself as a homeless man to test people's compassion. Daniel found himself at the center of a media storm. Reporters clamored for interviews, eager to hear about the man who had shown kindness to a disguised billionaire. He handled the attention with grace, using the platform to speak about the importance of empathy and generosity. I didn't do anything special, Daniel insisted in one interview. I just treated someone the way I would want to be treated if I were in their shoes, and I've been in those shoes before. Meanwhile, Emily's act of kindness hadn't gone unnoticed either. Warren had left her a check for $50,000, a gesture that left her overwhelmed with gratitude. She announced plans to use the money to pursue her long-deferred dream of attending college. The experiment sparked intense debates across the nation. Many felt ashamed, recognizing how they might have treated someone they perceived as homeless. Others tried to justify their behavior, leading to heated discussions about social responsibility and human dignity. Warren Buffett himself remained relatively quiet, allowing the story to unfold organically. When pressed for comment, he offered a simple yet powerful statement. The true measure of a person's character is not how they treat the rich and powerful, but how they treat those who can offer them nothing in return. As the days passed, the story continued to resonate. Daniel used part of his windfall to open a small restaurant, aptly named The Generous Heart. He made it a point to hire people struggling to get back on their feet, giving them the same chance he had received years ago. The experiment had lasting effects beyond just Daniel and Emily. It prompted many to reconsider their attitudes towards the less fortunate and sparked initiatives to address homelessness and poverty in communities across the country. Warren Buffett's experiment had done more than test people's compassion. It had started a movement. In the weeks following Warren Buffett's social experiment, Omaha experienced a profound shift in its social fabric. The story of Daniel's kindness and subsequent reward had touched hearts across the city, inspiring a wave of compassion and community engagement. The Generous Heart, Daniel's new restaurant, quickly became more than just a place to eat. It evolved into a symbol of second chances and human dignity. The establishment's hiring policy, which prioritized those struggling to re-enter the workforce, garnered national attention. One morning, as Daniel was preparing for the lunch rush, he received an unexpected visitor. Mayor John Stothert walked in, accompanied by a small entourage. "Mr. Daniel," she greeted warmly. "I've been following your story, and I must say you've inspired our city." Daniel, still not entirely comfortable with his newfound fame, smiled humbly. "I'm just trying to pay it forward, Mayor. And that's exactly why I'm here," she replied. "We want to partner with you on a new initiative. We're calling it Omaha Cares, a program to provide job training and support for our homeless population. Would you be interested in being our community liaison?" Daniel's eyes widened. This was an opportunity to make a real difference on a larger scale. "I'd be honored," he said, his voice thick with emotion. As news of the Omaha Cares initiative spread, other cities began to take notice. Mayors from across the country reached out, eager to implement similar programs in their own communities. Meanwhile, Emily's life had taken an equally dramatic turn. With the money Warren Buffett had given her, she enrolled in the University of Nebraska, Omaha, pursuing a degree in social work. Her experiences had ignited a passion for helping others, and she was determined to make the most of this opportunity. One evening, as Emily was studying in the university library, she received a call from an unknown number. "Hello, is this Emily?" a familiar voice asked. Emily's heart raced. She recognized the voice immediately. "Mr. Buffett, please call me Warren," he chuckled. "I hope I'm not interrupting your studies." "Not at all," Emily replied, still in disbelief. "I've been following your progress, Emily. Your dedication is admirable. I have a proposition for you. How would you like to intern at the Bill Melinda Gates Foundation next summer? I've spoken with my good friend Bill, and we both agree you'd be a perfect fit." Emily was speechless. This internship could open doors she had never even dreamed of. I don't know what to say, Mr. Warren. Thank you. Yes, absolutely yes." As she hung up the phone, Emily realized that her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined, all because of a simple act of kindness on a cold autumn morning. As the story of Warren Buffett's experiment continued to captivate the nation, media outlets clamored for exclusive interviews and in-depth features. News vans lined the streets outside the Generous Heart, and reporters became a common sight around. The University of Nebraska, Omaha, hoping to catch a glimpse of Emily. One crisp morning, Daniel found himself in New York City, a guest on a popular morning talk show. As he sat in the green room, nervously adjusting his tie, he couldn't help but marvel at the surreal turn his life had taken. "We're live in 3, 2, 1, the producer counted down. "Good morning, America," the charismatic host beamed at the camera. "Today we have a very special guest, a man whose act of kindness towards a disguised Warren Buffett has sparked a nationwide movement. Please welcome Daniel Thompson." As Daniel walked onto the set, the studio audience erupted in applause. He waved shyly, still not used to such attention. "Daniel, welcome to the show," the host said warmly. "Tell us, how has your life changed since that fateful day?" Daniel took a deep breath. "Well, it's been quite a whirlwind," he began. "But, you know, the most significant change isn't the money or the attention. It's the opportunity to make a real difference, to help people who are in the same position I once was." As Daniel shared his story, viewers across America were moved by his humility and genuine desire to help others. Social media exploded with supportive messages and "be more like." Daniel began trending nationwide. Meanwhile, as she walked across campus, she noticed a familiar face approaching Oprah Winfrey, accompanied by a camera crew. "Emily," Oprah called out, her trademark warm smile lighting up her face. "I hope you don't mind, but I'd love to have a chat with you for my new documentary series on everyday heroes." Emily, starstruck, managed to stammer out a yes. As they sat down on a nearby bench, Oprah asked, "Emily, you could have used Warren Buffett's gift for anything. Why choose social work?" Emily's initial nervousness faded as she spoke about her passion. "Because I've seen firsthand how a small act of kindness can change someone's life. I want to be part of that change, to help create a world where everyone is treated with dignity, regardless of their circumstances." As the interview concluded, Oprah surprised Emily with news that her production company would be funding a full scholarship program for students pursuing careers in social work, inspired by Emily's story. The media frenzy surrounding Daniel and Emily served to keep the conversation about social responsibility and compassion alive long after the initial shock of Warren Buffett's experiment had faded. Their stories were becoming catalysts for real, lasting change. As autumn gave way to winter, the impact of Warren Buffett's experiment continued to ripple outward, touching lives far beyond Omaha. The story had struck a chord with people across the globe, inspiring countless acts of kindness and spurring conversations about social responsibility. In New York City, a group of Wall Street executives moved by Daniel's story launched a mentorship program for individuals transitioning out of homelessness. They offered financial advice, job training, and networking opportunities to help people rebuild their lives. Meanwhile, in Silicon Valley, a team of tech entrepreneurs developed an app inspired by Emily's gesture, called Kindness Cafe. It allowed users to buy virtual coffees or meals for strangers in need. Local cafes and restaurants could then redeem these virtual purchases, providing real food to those who couldn't afford it. Back in Omaha, Daniel's restaurant had become a beacon of hope. One chilly evening, as he was closing up, he noticed a young woman hesitating outside the door. Her clothes were tattered, and she looked like she hadn't eaten in days. "We're about to close, but please come in," Daniel called out. The woman, who introduced herself as Sarah, shared her story over a warm meal. She had fled an abusive relationship with nothing but the clothes on her back. "I don't know what to do," she confessed, tears welling in her eyes. Daniel listened intently, then made a decision. "Sarah, how would you like a job? We need help in the kitchen and we provide training." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "Really? But I don't have any experience." Daniel smiled warmly. "Everyone deserves a chance. That's what this place is all about." As Sarah began her new job the next day, Daniel realized that the true power of kindness lay in its ability to create a chain reaction of goodwill. Chapter 10. The Global Stage. 6 months after Warren Buffett's experiment, the United Nations took notice of the movement it had sparked. They invited Warren, Daniel, and Emily to speak at a special session on combating global poverty and homelessness. As they prepared for their speeches in a New York hotel room, Warren turned to his companions with a twinkle in his eye. "You know, when I started this experiment, I never imagined it would lead us here." Emily nodded, still in awe of the turn her life had taken. "It's incredible how one small act can change everything," Daniel added thoughtfully. "And it's not just about the big gestures. It's about changing how we see and treat each other every day." The next morning, as they stood before the assembly of world leaders, each shared their perspective on the power of compassion and the importance of seeing the humanity in every individual. Warren spoke about the responsibility of the wealthy to give back and the need for systemic change. Daniel shared his journey from homelessness to business owner, emphasizing the importance of second chances. Emily discussed her experiences as a social work student and her vision for a more empathetic society. As they concluded their speeches, The assembly hall erupted in a standing ovation. Several world leaders approached them afterward, eager to discuss implementing similar initiatives in their own countries. Later that evening, as they watched the sunset from the top of the Empire State Building, Warren turned to Daniel and Emily. "You two have turned a simple experiment into a global movement. I couldn't be prouder." Daniel smiled, his eyes misty. "We just followed your lead, Mr. Buffett. You showed us that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives we touch." Emily nodded in agreement, and in the process we've all become richer. They knew that their work was far from over, but they had started something powerful, a wave of kindness and opportunity that would continue to grow and touch lives for years to come. 5 years had passed since Warren Buffett's initial experiment, and the impact of their work had spread far beyond the borders of Omaha. The Buffett-Thompson-Carter Foundation had become a global force for change, with initiatives in over 100 countries. On a warm summer day, Warren, Daniel, and Emily found themselves in a small village in rural India, inaugurating the latest Generous Heart Community Center. The center, like its counterparts around the world, was designed to provide education, job training, and support to those in need. As they cut the ribbon, cheers erupted from the gathered crowd. A local woman, Priya, stepped forward to share her story. "Before this center came, I had no hope for my future," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Now I have learned to read and write, and I am training to become a teacher myself. I will be able to give my children the opportunities I never had." Daniel, his eyes misting, turned to Warren. "Did you ever imagine we'd be here when you first sat on that street corner?" Warren shook his head, a gentle smile on his face. "No, but that's the beauty of kindness. You never know how far its ripples will reach." Later that evening, as they sat under the stars, Emily shared some exciting news. "The United Nations has been monitoring our progress," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "They want to use our model as a blueprint for a global initiative to combat poverty and homelessness." Daniel leaned back, taking in the magnitude of what they had accomplished. "It's amazing to think that a simple act of kindness could lead to all this." Warren nodded thoughtfully. "It just goes to show that the greatest investments we can make are in human potential." As they continued their conversation, plans for the future began to take shape. They discussed expanding their educational programs, developing new technologies to reach remote areas, and creating partnerships with governments and other organizations to amplify their impact. The experiment that began on a cold Omaha morning had evolved into a global movement, changing countless lives and reshaping the way the world thought about kindness, opportunity, and human dignity. 10 years to the day after Warren Buffett's social experiment, Omaha was buzzing with excitement. People from all over the world had gathered for the first ever Global Kindness Summit, hosted by the Buffett-Thompson-Carter Foundation. The convention center was packed as Warren, Daniel, and Emily took the stage for the opening address. As they looked out at the sea of faces, policymakers, business leaders, activists, and ordinary citizens, united by a common cause, they felt a sense of awe at what had been accomplished. Warren stepped up to the microphone first. "A decade ago, I set out to test the compassion of strangers. What I discovered was not just the capacity for kindness in individuals, but the power of that kindness to transform entire communities and, indeed, the world." Daniel spoke next, his voice strong and confident, a far cry from the man who had once lived on the streets. "We've seen firsthand that when you give people a chance, when you see their worth and invest in their potential, miracles can happen, not just for individuals, but for entire societies." Emily concluded their opening remarks. "The work we've done over the past decade has shown us that kindness is not just a feel-good concept. It's a powerful force for social change, economic development, and human progress." As the summit progressed, success stories poured in from around the globe. A Generous Heart Center in Brazil had revitalized an entire favela. A job training program in South Africa had reduced youth unemployment by 40 in participating communities. A microfinance initiative in Bangladesh, inspired by their model, had lifted thousands out of poverty. On the final day of the summit, Warren, Daniel, and Emily gathered for a private moment before the closing ceremony. "You know," Warren said, his eyes twinkling, I've made a lot of wise investments in my life, but none have paid off quite like that $10 bill I gave you, Daniel. Daniel chuckled, shaking his head in amazement. And to think I almost walked past you that day. Emily smiled, linking arms with both of them. I guess it just goes to show that you never know how a small act of kindness might change the world. As they walked onto the stage one last time, the applause was deafening. But more than the accolades, it was the knowledge of lives changed and hope restored that filled their hearts. The experiment that began on a cold Omaha street corner had become a legacy, a testament to the enduring power of human kindness and the extraordinary change that can come from ordinary compassion. As they gazed out at the glittering city below, they knew that this was just the beginning. The ripple effect of kindness they had set in motion would continue to spread, touching lives and changing the world, one small act at a time. After their whirlwind trip to New York and the United Nations, Warren, Daniel, and Emily returned to Omaha, each carrying a renewed sense of purpose. The city welcomed them back as heroes, with a crowd gathering at the airport to greet them. As they stepped off the plane, they were met by Mayor Stothert and a sea of familiar faces, regulars from Daniel's restaurant, Emily's classmates, and many of the people they had helped over the past months. Welcome home, the mayor beamed, presenting each of them with a key to the city. Omaha is proud of what you've accomplished and the message you've spread to the world. Daniel, overwhelmed by the reception, spoke from the heart. This key represents more than just an honor. It represents the doors we can open when we choose kindness and compassion, Emily added, her voice filled with emotion. And it reminds us that home isn't just a place. It's the community we build together. Warren, standing back and watching with pride, realized that his experiment had evolved into something far greater than he had ever imagined. It wasn't just about testing people's reactions. It was about inspiring a movement. The following day, they met at the Generous Heart to discuss their next steps. The restaurant had become more than just a business. It was now the unofficial headquarters of their growing movement. We've made a good start, Warren began, but there's still so much to be done. How do we keep this momentum going? Daniel leaned forward, his eyes bright with an idea. What if we create a network of restaurants like this one across the country? Places that not only serve food, but also serve as community centers for job training and support. Emily nodded enthusiastically. And we could partner with universities to create scholarship programs for students who want to work in community development and social services. Warren smiled, impressed by their vision. I think you're onto something. But let's think even bigger. What if we create a foundation that could fund and support these initiatives worldwide? As they continued to brainstorm, the energy in the room was palpable. They were no longer just three individuals brought together by chance. They were a team, united by a common goal to change the world through kindness and opportunity. Over the next year, the impact of their initiative grew exponentially. The Buffett-Thompson-Carter Foundation, named after Warren, Daniel, and Emily, was established with an initial endowment of $1 billion from Warren Buffett, the foundation's first. Project was to replicate the Generous Heart model in 50 cities across the United States. Each restaurant would serve as a hub for job training, financial literacy classes, and community support. Emily, now graduated and armed with her social work degree, took charge of developing the educational programs. She worked tirelessly to create curriculums that would empower people to build better lives for themselves. Daniel, drawing from his own experiences, became the face of the Foundation's mentorship program. He traveled across the country, sharing his story and inspiring others who were struggling to find hope. Warren, true to his nature, focused on the financial aspects, ensuring that the Foundation's resources were used efficiently and effectively. He also used his influence to encourage other wealthy individuals to contribute to the cause. One crisp autumn morning, exactly 2 years after the original experiment, they gathered once again on the street corner where it all began. The transformation was remarkable. Where once there had been indifference and despair, now there was a vibrant community center, bustling with activity. As they watched people entering the center, some for job interviews, others for classes, and many simply for a warm meal and friendly conversation, Warren turned to his companions. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when I first came up with this experiment, I thought I was testing the kindness of strangers. But what I've learned is that kindness isn't just about random acts. It's about building systems and communities that support and uplift everyone." Daniel nodded in agreement. "It's about seeing the potential in people even when they can't see it in themselves." Emily added, "And it's about creating opportunities for people to help themselves and then pay it forward." As they stood there, reflecting on their journey, a young woman approached them. She looked nervous but determined. "Excuse me," she said. "I've just completed the job training program at the center. I wanted to thank you all for giving people like me a second chance." As they listened to her story of transformation, Warren, Daniel, and Emily shared a look of quiet satisfaction.